let's go down to Clearwater. Port Charlotte, actually, is where the Phillies were today as the Phillies opened up the spring training portion of their season. Now, they're really kind of, going with the AAA rotation, Frank, to kind of start things off here. You're not really going to see Nola or any of the starting rotation here, but we did see live baseball, and you were there as the Phillies took on the Tampa Bay Rays today down in Port Charlotte. How was the game?
Oh, it was very nice. Nice, 85, sunny. The exact opposite of we've had back home in the last week. So very nice, and nice to see some actual live baseball. And even though they did not pitch any of their major league rotation, you got to see Cole Irvin, who is somebody that's going to be at AAA next year and could figure into the Phillies' plans at some point. Nice left-handed pitcher. It was nice to actually get to see him pitch against some major league competition because the Rays had their starters in, that's for sure.
So let's start with number one. You're at Port Charlotte today, and probably a good crowd to see baseball for the first time. Is the conversation around the around the stadium Bryce Harper? Is he basically all anyone's still chirping about down there?
Pretty much. Good amount of Phillies fans here. In fact, as I was just setting up my camera, Larry Anderson and Scott Fransky walked by, and people are asking them, "Oh, any new rumors out there?" And of course, they joke, "Well, what are you talking about? What rumors?" But yeah, everybody's buzzing. It's almost like there's an expectation that the Phillies will add Bryce Harper at some point, and everybody is just impatiently waiting, and if you look on Twitter, you can't go very far without seeing somebody asking, "Is this the day?" But the Phillies, it seems like they're sitting pretty, especially today when the Nationals owner.
We might have lost Frank down there just when he was giving us some stuff on Randy Lerner, I believe, the Nationals owner, who I believe came out today and essentially said that they haven't heard from, and we'll let Frank get you back up to date on that. But you were talking about the Nationals owner.
Yeah, so he came out and basically said that they had not heard from Scott Boras in a couple of months, and they seem to indicate they have no idea what Bryce Harper is up to. So, the one team that some people nationally think might jump in on this is the Washington Nationals. And it really came down to if the ownership just decided, what the heck, we'll just spend the money and keep him. But there's no signs that that's going to be the case.
So were the Nationals, in your mind, the one team that could have possibly retained, or is there still another team that maybe you have, some, I don't want to say concern, but some realistic feelings could jump in there and be a realistic suitor for him?
Well, here's the thing. Mark Lerner, who made the comments today, is the son, and Ted Lerner is the father. And, as we saw in the past, a lot of owners like the late Mike Gill, and, of course, the late boss up in New York, they would just spend money on what they liked, and they didn't care. The kind of the wild card here is if Ted Lerner just jumps in and says, well, look, I'll write the check myself. In a way that John Middleton reportedly said about Jim Thome many, many moons ago when the Phillies looked to add Jim Thome. But really, it's really hard to find any more competition. The White Sox seem like that they're out of it. The San Diego Padres, there was a report that they might consider going after Bryce too, but all reports out of there from some of their best writers, they all say that no, they're out on Harper. So the possible teams out there seem to really be dwindling. The only one that hasn't been ruled out really is the San Francisco Giants, but they seem to be wanting to look at a shorter term deal, and it seems like Bryce Harper is going to go for the longest possible term that he can get.
Frank is in Port Charlotte. Phillies today, by the way, they win 3-2, and Franco with a dinger as he takes the ball that goes yard for the Phillies. Also, Kingery with kind of a spring training home run, if you will.
Little League home run, yeah. Kevin Kiermaier in center field just badly misjudged it, and Kingery just put his head down and kept running and ended up circling the bases. So nice hustle out of Kingery there.
Yeah, the center fielder kind of ball hit his glove, fell out. Kingery comes around third. And then the throw home was bizarre. Like the catcher kind of misplayed that. It kind of juggled all over the place, and Kingery got it inside the park. Did they call that a home run, or was it an error?
No, they gave him an error. I guess I could not tell from my viewpoint whether or not it actually hit Kiermaier's glove.
Yeah, it definitely hit his glove.
The rules say if it hits the glove, you can call the error, but if it didn't, it would have been an inside the park home run.
We also saw, as we mentioned, Franco. I mean, he hits the home run there, and it looks like Gabe Kapler. Sorry, man, I'm blanking on names bad as I'm getting over here. Gabe Kapler. He said that there was going to be a competition between Kingery and Franco at third base, right? I mean, that was kind of how he said it if they didn't get Machado.
Yeah, I think they still want to push Franco. Franco certainly could have lost his job to Manny Machado if the Phillies ended up signing Machado. And I think they really don't want Franco to take things for granted. For some reason, I want to say for some reason, I mean, part of it's his own fault. Some of his slumps in the past kind of put him in the Phillies' doghouse. And I think the Phillies want more consistency out of the position, whether it's from Franco or somebody else. So they don't want to just go into spring training kind of handing Maikel Franco the job. He's got to really go and show that he has earned the job, and he also has to play with some consistency. Otherwise, I think they'll put Scott Kingery there. Now, today, Scott Kingery played alongside him at shortstop, on the left side there. But a lot will tell us where they're going in the future if we see Scott Kingery start to play a lot of third during spring training. And I think he's going to need to if that's going to be the plan.
Well, yeah, Frank, because we don't think he's going to play shortstop like he did last year primarily for at least 75% of the season. And then, because Segura's there, and if he's not there, second base, you go back to a situation where you see Kingery kind of rolling between second, third, and, I mean, the outfield's even more crowded this year, especially if they got Harper.
Yeah, I don't think that there's a lot of competition to be a utility player for the Phillies infield, so I think they kind of view him this year as somebody who can bounce around the infield. One thing that's not really clear is who will back up first base, if they go with the many outfielders they have, and kind of Kingery is that roving infielder. So he's probably going to have to pick up a first baseman's glove at some point as well. But I think the plan for Kingery long-term is that he's going to be the second baseman after Cesar Hernandez's contract is up after this year. But for now, I think they're content on having as much talent there as possible. And I think they still think very, very highly of Scott Kingery, and that they're going to want him to play a lot and kind of potentially being the only backup infielder, depending on how the roster sets up. He's probably going to play a lot.
Now, Roman Quinn got the start in center field. He also led off today. And I know you had said if Harper is not here, you think Quinn will be the everyday center fielder?
I do, and I think he could be the everyday center fielder even with Harper there if the Phillies can maybe make a trade for Odubel Herrera. A couple teams still looking for outfielders. The Cleveland Indians, I think Herrera would be a great fit there if they can match up on a trade. If the Indians have other assets they want to move, but the Indians really have no outfield at the moment, and I think that he's somebody that could be moved if necessary, or if they have everybody. I mean, you're probably finding yourself in a situation where someone like Nick Williams has to start the year in AAA because he's the only one with options left.
You mentioned Odubel, who's hurt. Do you think that he is, or the Phillies are trying to move him? Would you think, behind closed doors, they might not come out and say it, but they would, I don't say love, but that they would be willing to move on from him?
I would say they have enough concerns about his consistency that they would be open to it. I think they do believe he's a very talented player, and if he plays with consistency, could be very, very good. But I think the way that the team is approaching 2018 as a year that they really want to win, I don't know that they can afford to have inconsistency at potentially two positions on their starting lineup. So I think they can kind of stick with Franco. They can kind of stick with Herrera to a certain extent, but I don't think there's a long leash, especially because it's time to win now. The last couple of years, it was time to show us what you could do. That was kind of the motto the Phillies had. So if they're not going to show consistency, they're not going to play, and that's basically what a contender does.
Frank Klose in Port Charlotte. Phillies today beat the Rays 3-2 to open up spring training, and Cole Irvin started. Did we see any other arms that potentially are in a battle for a position, for a roster spot, or that, are on the bubble, or that will be in the bullpen this year?
Yeah, so they did get to look at a couple lefties. Austin Davis, who was with the Phillies last year, James Pezos was also on the mound today. They'll be competing for left-handed bullpen role, and the Phillies have many options this year heading into spring training. Last year they kind of had Adam Morgan, and that was it for a while. And Austin Davis eventually came along, but perhaps he was rushed a little bit. But they had Pezos, they have Alvarez they acquired from the Angels. They have Davis back in camp. They have Adam Morgan there. So figuring out who their best lefties to move forward are going to be one of the questions. And you got to see a couple of them today. And by the way, a lot of the game was pitched by people wearing jerseys without names that came over from minor league camp. We see every once in a while on these longer road trips, they'll get the guys a cup of coffee. Tom Wendell got the pitch, Tyler Vizza got the pitch, and so did Andrew Brown, who was an outfielder in the Phillies system, and they just converted to pitching last year, so he got to pitch a little bit. So those types of guys, helped fill up the game a little bit, but the lefties on the mound today, potential bullpen arms in Davis and Pezos and Cole Irvin. Those were the guys that really were the ones to look at from today's game.
By the way, ESPN scored it a triple to center field and a throwing error by a shortstop. So they didn't call an error on the center fielder. They called an error on the throw.
Wow, that's interesting. I did not catch that. I assumed the error must have been Kiermaier in center field, and maybe it didn't hit his glove then. Because if it hit his glove, then it seems like it would be his error to have.
It seemed like it hit his glove as he was. It seemed like he was backpedaling, lost his footing, and it hit his glove as he was falling backwards. So I don't know if they said that made it a more difficult play. I don't know. You were there.
Yeah, that's a very curious play, and actually I got some really good action shots with my camera of Kingery rounding the bases, so I did not notice that throwing error for the shortstop.
Hey, you did get a chance to say Mickey Moniak. People might forget he was the #1 overall pick in the draft. Did they view him as anything like a higher level prospect, or is he kind of, what would you say the Phillies view him as at this point? What was he drafted 2 or 3 years ago now? #1 overall?
Yeah, #1 overall. So we're talking what, three at this point. Yeah, 2 years ago was Adam Haseley, who was also playing. So it was actually kind of cool that when they did the first round of subs, you had Adam Haseley in center field, and then you had Mickey Moniak in left field. And I think that's actually kind of that Haseley has kind of leapfrogged Moniak in terms of the development. And look, when they drafted Moniak first overall, it was not a good.
We lost Frank again. Nope, there he goes.
Develop. Can you hear me?
Yeah,
sorry,
we lost you for
the cell service down here has been terrible. Yeah, terrible cell service down here. But I was saying Haseley seems to have leapfrogged Moniak in terms of kind of the depth chart in the minor leagues. And, being an 18-year-old when he was drafted, Moniak, I think they knew that they had a ways to go with him, and lots of development was on the road ahead. So I still think they think very much of his talent, and this is a situation where they had to develop it because really there weren't a lot of other good options in the first round, and the arms that they were considering at the time, such as AJ Puck and Barnegat's Jay Groom, those guys, both of them had arm surgery already, so. I think they might have made the best possible choice, but it was not a very good draft overall. It's a shame the year they picked first overall, there was no big name like a Bryce Harper or Mike Trout that year.
Yeah, it figures that would be the way it works out. So Moniak got a little bit of playing time today. He was in left field. We also saw Nick Williams, a guy who I guess, if there's any roster, I don't know. Do you think Nick Williams is on the roster but as a bench player, or do you think that he is battling for a platoon role, or does that – it obviously all changed with Harper. But what is the Nick Williams, Aaron Altair story?
Well, I think Aaron Altair as the lone backup right-hander makes the roster. If the Phillies have Quinn and Herrera and Williams all on the roster, still, after signing Bryce Harper, I can see Nick Williams going to AAA. Only because he's the only one who's got an option left, and he would be the fourth outfielder in the major leagues if all works out. So the corners are going to be McCutchen and Harper if they get Harper. There's really not a spot for him to be a starter. He's somebody they might consider moving in the right deal, but I think if they can move somebody like Herrera and get some value in return, maybe there's a third base prospect, since that's a position that's not really settled that much. They have Alec Boehm, who's their first draft pick from last year, who's a third baseman, but it would be nice to see some depth in the system at third base, and maybe they can convert somebody like Herrera to a third base prospect. And then you could have your backup outfielders in Altair and Williams, which I think are two very talented players who I think would be good pieces on a roster as reserves.
Yeah, by the way, Odubel Herrera took batting practice and threw long toss yesterday after tweaking his hamstring earlier in camp. So he was not quite ready yet. But Grapefruit League underway for the Phillies. Frank Klose is with the Phillies today. Tomorrow they will play again in Clearwater, so their home opener for the Grapefruit League. And what about the backup catcher spot? Is that Knapp?
That's one that actually bears some watching. They've got some veterans around. They have we saw Rob Brantley catch a little bit today. He's an option as a veteran backup, and Drew Butera is someone they also signed who was on the world champion Royals team a couple years ago. He could be a backup. So Andrew Knapp got to catch today. He took the trip down. I think they're gonna see how they feel about Knapp on their roster. And Knapp is somebody who can be optioned in the minor leagues as well. So you really want to keep some catching depth around. You always want to have a kind of a third guy that you can turn to, and in a pinch. And maybe Butera or Brantley squeezes Knapp to AAA, and he'd be somebody that the Phillies can call up in a pinch. The Phillies have been really lucky the last several years with catchers at being healthy. So. Especially if you're going to be a contender, you want some depth, and maybe Butera or Brantley at AAA provide that depth. And Knapp is in the major leagues, but you got to figure, you need three guys to get through a year usually, and hopefully between one of those veterans and Knapp, they'll work it out. But we'll see how well Knapp plays in the Grapefruit League. And if they're comfortable with his handling of the pitchers, I think that's going to be what tells the story in the end.
Yeah, obviously, Real Muto's the guy there. Now, and going back to that Nick Williams conversation we just had, I think that trade, is example A, B, C. The Phillies have made trades over the years where they have traded prospects away and gotten the established player, and traded the established players away and gotten prospects. I feel like the established player wins that trade almost 80% of the time. And I don't think it's ever worked out for the Phillies when they've got the prospects in return. Like, they traded Hamels away. There's not one guy in that deal. Nick Williams has been Jake Thompson's cut. They traded away the catcher. I mean, these 5-for-1 deals sound great at the time. But in the end, get the better player. Get Real Muto and move on. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think they definitely realize that. And by the way, I think Jorge Alfaro will be a major league catcher for a long time, and he's not somebody to scoff at in that deal. But he helped you bring back JT Realmuto, and I realize that they're not going to get the value back from that trade in terms of Alfaro making it as an impact catcher. But at the very least, he helped them acquire an impact catcher, and that's how it works sometimes. As you're going back and forth, prospects for established players, players for established prospects. Cole Hamels on that Phillies team the last couple of years would not. I mean, actually, he would have helped you last year if they did reacquire him when he was basically out there for free. But really, in the Cedric Hunter, Peter Bourjos, Michael Saunders era, Cole Hamels wasn't going to give you a lot anyway, so you got to take some chances. And I think the trade was fine. I think Nick Williams is a major leaguer. I think Jorge Alfaro is a major leaguer. and that's pretty
I'd
decent
still rather
value.
have Cole Hamels.
Well, you know what? Cole Hamels is probably towards the end of his career at this point, and now it's time to win again. Might it be helpful to have him now? Yes. Would have been
right, like hindsight 2020, you're better off. Hindsight 2020, you're better off with Cole Hamels today than you are with any of the 5 guys they gave you.
But are you able to land Real Muto? I guess that's the big question. If you still have it, I would have picked up Cole Hamels last year. That's the one thing I thought and I think the Phillies have acknowledged that they kind of regret not getting a lefty starter down the stretch last year.
Sure.
But,
and they need one now.
They still need one now, and I will say Hamels was readily available last year, so I don't fault them for that. I mean, it's kind of like people when they speak of, again, another prospect trade, Carlos Carrasco, who they gave up for Cliff Lee in the beginning. Carlos Carrasco at one point was available for any team because the Indians had designated him for assignment and nobody claimed him. And then he ended up being a really nice pitcher. So that was a situation where the Phillies could have grabbed him. So, so hindsight's kind of tough, but I would have still advocated that they trade Cole Hamels back then, no matter what, because they had to inject some new life into the system and at least have the opportunity for some of these guys to work out. And you never know. Maybe the Phillies are able to make another deal that involves Nick Williams that gets them something else that they can use. So I think that the story is not over yet to kind of totally judge that deal. But
and that's
Real Muto is
that's a fair point
really
on Real
nice
Muto. They traded Alfaro in the deal, so they get Real Muto back. So that's a fair point to say, hey, but my point is more, they traded for Cliff Lee. Carrasco turned into a pretty good pitcher, but the rest of those guys never made it. They traded for Halladay. None of those guys made it. There's tons of trades in the past that they've got the better player and it's worked out, and there's tons of times where they got the prospects and the prospects didn't help you out all that much.
Yeah, and so it goes. So, there's a few famous trades out there, like the one Mark Teixeira trade, that basically you reset the Texas Rangers for the next 12 years, as they basically got their core all in one trade from trading Mark Teixeira. But more times than not, the acquiring team is going to do a little bit better with the impact player. But it all depends on when the team's ready to win. And I think too, besides if you're matching up talent, there is a certain sense of necessity to turn the page like they did by trading Cole Hamels to really signal that it was going to be a new era of Phillies baseball. And who knows, maybe before he retires, he finds himself back in Philly for a year or something. We'll see.
By the way, all right, Frank Klose is in Florida tomorrow, Clearwater, for the Phillies home opener at Spectrum Field. Where are Frank's hot spots of Clearwater?
Oh, my. So, well, you want to get to the beach. That's the one thing. Clearwater Beach is one of the top beaches. And if you want to go to a little quieter beach where there's perhaps less nightlife, heading out to Honeymoon Island. And from Honeymoon Island, you can get a ferry to Caladesi Island, which is pretty much there's no traffic on there at all. It's only foot traffic only. Really neat place to visit. There's more and more lots of good breweries. I like checking out Safety Harbor. The main street on Safety Harbor has some nice little bars and restaurants that are very nice to visit. I like going to Tampa. Cigar City Brewing Company has always been one of my favorites. They were one of the original craft breweries. There's always so much to do, and I never get to do it all. But, as you often remind me, the Clearwater Bait House, right over the bridge towards Clearwater Beach, has some amazing food.
Yes, that has got to be number one on everybody's list, the Clearwater Bait House. Make sure if you're going to Clearwater for Phillies spring training. I had a friend of mine call me. He's taking his son down there, and he was asking me for the hot spots to go. And I said, whatever you do, you got to get to the Clearwater Bait House. Now, you just mentioned a couple of spots that I'd never done. So you seem to matriculate a little bit off the beach a little bit, like Safety Harbor's a little out there. You're into Tampa. Those are some different spots. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and actually St. Pete is nice too. There's a place called the Local Market down there. You get some really good fresh food, and the St. Peter's Burger is one of the kind of signature items down there. That's excellent. So and all these places are if you stay in Clearwater Central near the Phillies ballpark, you can get to any of these places in like 20, 30 minutes. So So lots of options, and Central Clearwater is kind of a place that's in the middle of everything.
All right, Frank will be at the home base tomorrow. Follow him on Twitter for updates throughout the Phillies game at Frank Klose. And, of course, the Phillies spring training is here, but no Bryce Harper. He has not found a landing spot just yet. Frank, we will be locked in on your Twitter to see if Bryce signs with the Phillies. And if he does tomorrow, some people thought today would be the day because Machado's press conference today? It was this morning. Some people were saying that he wanted to try to upstage that, but that didn't happen either.
Did not happen.
All these conspiracy theories. Yep, all these conspiracy theories. All right, Frank, take care, man.
Okay, good chat.